front sight, lift and come back down after every shot. Are you watching your front sight during every shot? Do you see your red dot lift and come back down after every shot? Are you seeing it move within its glass? Does it seem like you struggle aiming, like with your optics or with your irons? Well, this is going to be the video for you because I'm going to be going over how to aim with your optic, red dot, and how to aim with your iron sights. Some misconceptions with aiming with your optics, we're going to be going over this first, is staring at the red dot. You're not supposed to stare at the red dot. You're actually supposed to be target focused. So that basically means that when you're aiming with your optic and you have your red dot in the center of your glass, your optic, your little red dot right there, it's supposed to be kind of blurry when you place it on the target. The target is going to be clear as day. That is where your main focus is on, and then you're going to place that red dot kind of in the back of your mind right onto that target. So that is how you aim with your optic. It's the dot on the target, but not focused on the dot. Some people found that when, like myself, when you're training to learn the optics, shooting occluded, basically meaning you're putting a piece of like dark tape on the front of your glass that's going to help you learn to recognize the dot on the target with your target focus. That's going to help build out your eyesight towards that dot and picking it up in that way. Now, when you're shooting with an optic, distance is not going to be a big deal because you're always going to be target focused. So whether the target is like 5 yards and within or like 30 yards out there, you're still going to be target focused on all of that in between. This is a really great place and option to use to push speed because you're so target focused. You're not going back and forth aiming with your red dot and then looking at the target and getting the red dot on there and then going back to red dot focus. You're always going to be target focused when you are shooting with a dot. Now let's get to aiming with your iron sights. So this is considered a bit more complicated because there's a bit more going on. So you got your rear sight, your front sight, and then the target itself. So when you're aiming, most of the time I would say you're aiming with your front sight, changing out your front sight to something colorful or like green or red or black, or there's like orange out there as well. That's going to help draw your eyes to the front sight because the front sight's going to be the main focus 90% of time when you're shooting. So that's the front sight. The rear sight's supposed to be a little bit blurry as well as the target's supposed to be a little bit blurry. So when you're thinking about pushing speed and everything, when you're shooting like 5 yards in, and if you're a little bit more experienced like myself, 10 yards in, the front sight doesn't have to be super crystal clear, if that makes sense. Everything can be a little bit blurry. And then you start pushing it out to, 12, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 yards. That front sight starts being more clear and clear and clear and clear. For me, I shoot 90% of the time front sight focus. That's how my accuracy improves like crazy. Now we're going to get into a little bit more complications of iron sight aiming itself. So when you're like going through a stage or you have multiple targets in front of you, even if you're just standing and shooting at the shooting range, if you're going back and forth between your front sight and the target and everything, that's how the vision kind of works, is when you're clear, when you're going out and you're aiming at your target, you're front sight focused, right? All right, now you're going to transition to your other target. Well, your eyes are supposed to lead the gun. So you're going to come off your front sight and you're going to look at your other target. Okay, so your focus comes off the front sight and then your target becomes crystal clear because you're directly looking at that target, and you're going to bring your gun, you're going to bring your front sights into that target itself, and then you draw your eyes to the front sight. So iron sight shooting, you're constantly doing this, going back and forth between the target and the front sight focus. So it's a lot of eye exercises, it's a lot of eye movement, it's going back and forth constantly. And I like to think of the aiming space in between the front sight and the target. That's going to help you push speed, especially with irons. So you're not always irons front sight focused, rear sight focused, or target focused, kind of in that in-between realm. So if my target's out here, way out there, I'm going to be aiming like in between here, going back and forth between target and front sight. There's an in-between space where you can figure out how to push speed and not constantly go back and forth between target and front sight. But again, like I said, most of the time you're going to be front sight focused to improve and just go really high with that accuracy. So there's a lot of drills out there where you can push speed and figure out what in between aiming you need, as well as when you need to be target focused, when you need to be front sight focused. Some people say that irons is less fast than optics, because of that aiming routine that you're doing, constantly going back and forth. I haven't had a lot of issues with that because, well, I've been doing it for so long, but it's very good eye exercises. And then you go to a dot and you do target focus, and you go back to irons and you do mainly front sight focus. There's so many different aiming options out there. Just learning how to do each of those individually and, making your brain switch from one side to the other. Optics, I aim this way. Irons, I aim this way. So just spend a little bit of time on it. With iron sights, we talk about hard focus versus soft focus. Soft focus basically means everything's kind of blurry. The front sight, the rear sight, and the target. That's soft focus, especially on the front sight where it's not crystal clear. You may have the target a little bit more clear than the front sight. That's soft focus. That is meant for fast, run and gun, push and speed shooting. Now we get into hard focus, and hard focus is bringing that focus all the way back to your front sight and having that clear as day, just crystal clear. That's hard focus. So if you're in competition and you're going through stages and laying out your plans, you'll go through like certain targets and stuff that are, far close. You got hard cover, you've got like no shoots that you're not supposed to shoot, but they're on the target, where you're pointing out, okay, this is a super close target at 5 yards. I'm going to soft focus here. And then I'm going to transition to my next target, and that's a 20-yard hard cover shot. I'm going to go hard focus, front sight focus on that target. So that's hard focus versus soft focus when you're looking at iron sights. Then distance plays part of it. So like I said, when you're, close distance, you don't need to have super, high functioning focus on the front sight versus longer range. We're shooting handguns, so it's not like we're shooting 300 yards. We're shooting like 50 yards maximum. And that's where we're like ultra hard focused. So distance plays a little bit of a factor in speed and aiming and all of that. Then we get into not overrunning our vision, because we don't want our eyes to outrun the sights, if that makes sense. So when you're shooting really fast, your eyes and your front sight are working together to get that really good accuracy. But if you start pushing speed and you're not watching that front sight lift and come back down every single shot, you start to overrun it, and that's when your accuracy just plummets. So we're not pushing speed too much with our irons. We're building up speed and our vision and our focus, and this takes time and practice and a lot of training to do. I've been shooting iron sights for 12 years, and I'm still working on getting my vision and my front sight and my shooting all to just come together perfectly, in perfect harmony, getting that amazing rhythm with my vision. All right, now we're gonna go into story time, and this is one of my favorite stories of all time, and it still lives rent-free in my brain. So when I first won my very first national title, I was 15 years old, and it happened in Florida. It was during the big 9 days of nationals that year in 2018. It was really cool. But I wanna talk about, because I was shooting single stack and iron sights during that match, one of the 3 matches I was shooting it, and I was having the match of my life. And I want to kind of go into why I was, is because for years, I'm building my eyes, I'm building, watching my sight picture and my front sight and everything, and I would see my front sight lift, like I was actively watching it lift and come back down onto targets, but I was only getting that in, flashes. Like I would see it for like 1 stage of match, and then I'd see it for like 3 stages a match. I would see it for 30 rounds or 10 rounds, or going all over the place. But I was seeing it, and I was starting to build up that vision really well, where I was starting to see it almost every stage, but I wasn't seeing it every stage of every match. And I go into nationals and I start having the match of my life, because it was like the first match that I seen my sight lift and come back down on every single target. Now, we talked about soft focus versus hard focus, and just because I say I was watching my front sight lift and come back down on every target, I seen my sight on every target, that doesn't mean I was hard focused on every target. No, I had soft focus, I had hard focus, I had in between focus, and that just basically means, like, when I'm in soft focus, is that I'm not looking at the front sight. I'm looking at the front sight, the rear sight, and the target, and it's all slightly blurry, but nothing's crystal clear. I'm still seeing that sight lift and come back down, even though it's not in crystal clear focus. You're still seeing it, and I was still seeing that on every single target. It was like the first match that I seen my sight on every single target, and that's when it all just kind of like clicked and came together for me, and it was absolutely magical, and I've been seeing it basically ever since. Now, seeing the front sight lift and come back down on every single target, you're like, that's only relevant to irons. It's not. You can actually see your dot lift and come back down on every single target as well. Again, your dot is not the primary focus when you're shooting red dots. The target is, but you can still see that dot lift and come back down on every single target. It's building up that vision and doing vision exercises in order to achieve that. It's keeping your eyes open, it's watching for it, it's being very conscious. Once you start seeing it and doing drills to help you see either your front sight or your red dot lift and come back down on every single shot, then you can start pushing speed and getting used to that and doing more complicated things in order to see that more often and more often. The next thing you know, you're going to be seeing it lift and come back down on every single target every single time. Now, you're probably wondering how do I get to that point where I'm seeing my sight picture, my primary focus? How am I seeing that every single time? Well, luckily for you, I've got some awesome drills that we're going to be going over in new education and everything that I'm doing to help you aim and be a better shooter and just build everything up. So I've got some really great drills that I've done over the years, and some for, a decade, in order to build up my vision for both red dots and iron sights. So we're going to keep a watch out for those, because that is going to help you watch your sight picture every single shot, because it's pretty magical.
Walking the wide away, no one knows your name, but we should know your face.